please welcome back the chair of the Jewish Federations of North America, Julie Platt.
As we bring the GA to a close, we wanted to bring you one last conversation of inspiration. Sheryl Sandberg is a leader we came to know from afar through Option B and Lean In. But since October 7th, Sheryl has stepped into a new leadership role, giving voice to the victims of October 7th and using her power to cut through the noise. I am honored to call Sheryl a cherished friend, and I ask you to join me in welcoming a heroine for the Jewish people, Sheryl Sandberg. Hi, my friend.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everyone.
Okay, all of us have been deeply impacted by October 7th. You have always been affiliated as a Jew. We met when you were dropping off your children at Camp Ramah, but you are much more engaged, for sure, now. I've told you that you are a born-again Jew. I would love to start with you talking about the path you have been on as a Jewish leader that leads you to being here in this seat today.
Well, I'll start by thanking you for having me and saying what an honor it is to be in a room with the Jewish leaders who matter so much. So thanks to all of you for all you do. You know, I grew up as an affiliated Jew, kind of a weird household. We belonged to a Reform synagogue. We kept kosher. I went to Camp Coleman, big part of my childhood. My parents were very active in the Soviet Jewry movement. So I knew there was anti-Semitism because I marched and did all the things, but I thought anti-Semitism was something that existed in the Soviet Union or in history. Barry asked a really important question. She said, when do you know? When did you know? And if you listen to her speech, which I thought was so brilliant, I was late. My first inkling was on October 7th when my childhood friend Elise Sheck, who's also here, woke me up and said, Israel's at war. And I said, I can't believe it. But what I really couldn't believe is how many times since then I've said I can't believe. I said it when my mother-in-law was at MoMA and a mob of people came in screaming from the river to the sea and then started yelling, this place is run by wealthy Jews. And she and every other visitor were ushered out a side room. I said it just 3 months ago when I dropped my son off in college. And you know, you drop your kid off in college, for those of us who have, and there's the booths for the parents and the students. And one of those booths said, big sign, safety and security for Jewish students. I couldn't believe it. In 2024, I am dropping my kid off at college, and they think they need a booth to tell me my kid's gonna be safe, which obviously means they're not sure he is. And it is what Barry said, our long vacation from history is over. But for me, it's fundamentally changed me, and not in a bad way, but a very good way. And it reminds me, there are differences of my trajectory as a female leader. When I went into business, people said, are you a business person or a woman business person? Are you a business leader or a female business leader? And I had a very clear answer to that when I entered the workforce 30 years ago. I was a business person, and then a business leader. I was not a female business leader because I didn't need the adjective, because it was gonna be fine. My generation was gonna fix all the issues for women. And then I slowly, over the course of my decades in the workforce, realized that was not true and was not happening. And I became a female business leader, and that adjective meant more to me than the noun. And I feel the same way. I remember BBYO retreats of my childhood, and they would ask the question, are you a Jewish American or American Jew? Which part of your identity comes first? And this has definitely changed for me, but since October 7th, I sit on this stage as a different person, in the sense that Jewish is as important a part of my identity as anything else. I am female, I am a business leader, I am an American, and I am a Jew. And I sit on this stage as a proud Zionist, and a proud Jew in a way I wouldn't have a year and a half ago.
Sheryl, you said that speaking out about sexual violence that was perpetrated on October 7th and after, and making screams before silence is the most important work of your life. Many people here have watched it. I've watched it. We can't look away. What was the journey to the film and to using your platform and your voice to advocate for the issue of gender-based violence that occurred on October 7th?
So you know this, because you're always part of my journey as my friend, but I had left Meta a year before October 7th with a promise to myself that I was going to be quiet. Do some nice work in the women's space, not be a public kind of person anymore, and I was really enjoying that. And then after October 7th, the reports started coming out about sexual violence. The Free Press covered them, Jake Tapper covered them, Israeli news covered them, and really no one else. And the silence was deafening. The women's organizations, all the work we had done together to tell people, we have to believe women. It was as if none of that ever happened. And so I stepped out again. I spoke out, and I wrote an op-ed, and I helped organize an event at the UN. You helped me so much with that. And what I was trying to say to everyone is that this is a really important moment in time for the history of women, not just of Jews, but for women. So when you think about war, for the longest time, all throughout our history, women's bodies were part of the spoils of war. You got the land, you got the gold, you got the women. And then, only 30 years ago, in the former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, the DRC, the world stepped up, women's groups stepped up, human rights groups stepped up, and they said no. Rape is going to be punished, prosecuted as a war crime, as a crime against humanity, and it was. But if in this moment, our politics make us so blind that we are denying or facing with silence rape, clear rape, of victim after victim after victim that was murdered, we lose too much. And so I was trying to say exactly one thing, which is that rape is not resistance, ever, under any circumstances. So I said that, and the denial just kept happening. And then Jeffrey Gettleman wrote a very important piece for the New York Times. I'm sure you all read it. Jeffrey Gettleman is a Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times journalist who has covered rape in war for 30 years. Won a Pulitzer for this work. Never been attacked before. And all of a sudden, that article was just attacked. And I realized people are still just not believing this. And so I went to Israel, I made this film, the incredibly talented people who really made it. I was just the interviewer in it. And we were trying to give anyone an opportunity to bear witness. They can see for themselves. If you don't believe it, please watch. Due to the generosity of Carol and Joey Lowe, who financed the whole thing, it's available for you on YouTube for free to anyone. If you don't believe, watch. Just watch. Watch Amit Susanna. You can see the video of her being kidnapped, and then she will tell you what happened to her. And then watch the people that had to process the bodies of the women that were raped before they were murdered, that screamed before their silence. Sorry. Which is how we named the film. These are the screams before the silence of death. We've been very focused on college campuses. We've had over 100 screenings of the film on college campuses this fall. Hillel and Adam, thank you. You've done a great job. And a ton of these screenings have been done by AEPI, Jewish fraternity. And I got a chance to meet some of them at Berkeley just a few weeks ago. There's something about young Jewish men on campus, speaking out for Israel, speaking out against terror, and speaking out on sexual violence, that gives me hope, and should give all of us hope.
So Sheryl, you just talked about the young warriors we have, but I know many of us are discouraged by the fact that young, educated people on college campuses are denying everything you are saying. How'd we get here? What do we do about the fact that young, educated people, forget the rest of the people who have denied the sexual violence that you've expressed, the young campus, college-educated kids screaming to globalize the Intifada?
I'm not an expert, and there's a lot of ways we've gotten here, but I think one clear way we got here is not really understanding what was happening to education, and not just at the college level, but K through 12. For 20 years, in thousands of classrooms around our country and the world, and including today, as we sit here, kids are marching into classrooms and being taught a history that is not true. This happened in my children's school, and this is so heartbreaking for me. Just a few weeks ago, they played a video to a class, a religion class, called Zionism Explained. This video is produced by Turkish state media. It starts with the beginning, and it doesn't say Jews are the ancestral occupants of this land along with other people. It starts with that it's against the Jewish religion to have a state, and they shouldn't even have one in the first place. Then it goes to, in 1948, the Jews declared themselves a state and attacked all their neighbors. As if they just woke up one day and were like, I know what we'll do. We'll have war on all of our neighbors, unprovoked. And it goes on and on and on. That is playing in our kids' school. And so this is going to be hard because education's a very decentralized problem. We are going to have to go, all of us here, state by state, county by county, school district by school district, school by school, and fix the K through 12 curriculum. We have to do it. And we really have to pay attention to what's going on college campuses. Someone said to me, and Barry talked about this, that we were endowing buildings and they were endowing chairs. We gotta pay attention to the curriculum. And I think, and this is really important, and I know a little bit controversial, we need to stay engaged. There are voices out there that are saying we can't be part of these elite institutions. Julie, you've remained a leader and an important leader at the University of Pennsylvania. And what you've said is to quote Ann Richards, who says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu for lunch. We need to stay engaged. We have to stay engaged. And I now have 2 children in college. The thing that's hard, I think, as parents is we need our kids to be part of this. We need our kids in those schools, in the hard schools. We need our kids at Columbia and Berkeley and the Ivy League schools that don't seem to understand this so that their voices can be heard.
Political support for Israel is on everyone's mind, particularly of late. You have told me that part of being born again is you are thinking very clearly about your support. How are you thinking about it now?
So there's an old saying in US politics, no matter what else, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you have to do 2 things to run for office: kiss babies and support Israel. Those days are gone. Gone. Support for Israel is eroding on both sides of the aisle, particularly in the youth and particularly in the Democratic Party, but I think it's very important we all understand this, and I know you all do. It is eroding across the aisle, every aisle. And we can't let that happen. We cannot let this happen. I'm an affiliated Democrat. I've had many people say to me, how can you stay a Democrat? Well, my answer is to remember that the part of the Democratic Party that doesn't support us is not the mainstream, that there is a Democratic Party we can keep. I want a Richie Torres, Josh Shapiro Democratic Party. Right? If you're having a bad day, go on Instagram, look at 2 Instagrams, look at Richie Torres and Julie's son, Jonah Platt, and you will feel better. It works for me every time. But that Democratic Party exists if we stay in. If we don't stay in, we will have a situation where Israel is only supported by one party, and that is unacceptable. We also have to remember that the fight against anti-Semitism has to be nonpartisan. And this also has been very hard for me as someone who's always been on the kind of progressive left, that for a long time I've understood anti-Semitism on the right. It's Tree of Life, it's Charlottesville, it's neo-Nazis. I hate it, I abhor it, but I understand it. What surprised me was the anti-Semitism on the left, that it seemed more accepted. But then I remind myself, it is still on the far left. And we have to make sure we stay engaged to keep it there. We also have to keep the dialogue open. Amy Spitalnik did a webinar on anti-Semitism with AOC. You would have thought she committed some crime. Everyone went nuts. People said, how can you give AOC a platform? And AOC got her endorsement from the Socialists of America pulled. But you know what? That conversation's really important. Because if we're gonna fight anti-Semitism, we need to fight anti-Semitism with everyone. And you will never convince, we are not gonna convince anyone of something by not talking to them. That has never worked and will never work. And also, despite our Talmudic tradition of arguing with ourselves and each other, we need to stay united. We are Zionists, whether we're Republicans or Democrats. We are pro-Israel. We stand against anti-Semitism. We stand against all forms of hate, no matter where we are politically. And I think that is so, so, so critical in this moment.
Thanks, Sheryl. We've all learned a lot this year. Some things we didn't want to learn, but we have now. We've all had experiences we never thought we would have. What have you learned in the past year that you have not already talked about that you did not know before?
About a month after October 7th, I went on a walk with my friend Katie. It's a very common thing I do. Katie and I walk all the time and down the little suburban streets of Northern California. And we were just doing our normal catch up, and then what came out of my mouth was, will you hide me? Every single person in this room knows what I mean. Katie had no idea. She was like, what are you talking about? And so I explained. I explained that during the Holocaust, there were righteous Jews and righteous non-Jews who hid Jews. Some of them died. Some of them lived, but they risked their lives to hide Jews. And I said, will you hide me? I started crying. She started crying. She said, it's never going to come to this, but I will hide you. That change in our lives takes us to a place where we have to be so vulnerable. And I'm not used to being that vulnerable. This audience is filled with people who are philanthropists, who are used to giving their time and energy and passion to help others. We're not used to needing this help, but we need it. And Van Jones, who's been so outspoken for us, thank you, Van, right? He's said to me, and he's said publicly, Jews have to figure out how to build the muscle of asking for help. We also have to build the muscle of taking care of ourselves and protecting ourselves. The person I think is most eloquent on this is Sheila Katz, and she speaks so beautifully about how yes, let's applaud for Sheila. We have built the muscle of standing in solidarity with others, but we do not have the muscle of standing up for ourselves. And I realized how true this was. I was writing a speech for a unity march against anti-Semitism in the Bay Area. And I wanted to offer a really compelling reason why people who aren't Jewish should care about anti-Semitism. So I went where we all go. I looked at history. I said, if they come after the Jews, they're going to come after you. I went to that old poem. I said, historically, a rise in anti-Semitism is a harbinger of democratic breakdown. And then I realized that the fact that I thought I had to say that was a big part of the problem. Because we can't just speak out against anti-Semitism because they're going to do other bad things. Anti-Semitism is bad in and of itself. And we have to be willing to say that. And again, I think in order to say that, in order to reach out to our friends who aren't Jewish and say, I'm scared, in order to stand up for ourselves, in order to ask for help, we're going to have to be more vulnerable than any of us have been in a long time. But I think that vulnerability is going to be critical to getting us through this.
One last question for you, Sheryl. What do you want this group of Jewish leaders to think about as they walk out of this room, and what is your challenge to us as we go forth?
I guess I would say we should all be more like Julie. Everyone should be more like Julie. I don't know. I know this because she's such a dear friend, but this woman has barely slept in her own house since October 7th, and she has gone community, reminding us that we can stay together. And I just want to, if everyone can join me in applauding Julie.
Thank you, Sheryl. Keep going.
Yes!
Okay.
For Julie.
No. Oh. Thank you. Okay, that was totally not why I asked that question, Sheryl.
I want to be more like my parents. I sit on this stage as the proud daughter of Adele and Joel Sandberg. They're here with me today, a good Jewish daughter. I brought them, and my father-in-law. Thank you. But I think we also have to be really strategic. Really strategic. We have to care about what people think. We need people to understand Zionism, we need people to understand Israel, and we need people to understand anti-Semitism. And if we're gonna do that, we're gonna have to be smart about it. Psychologists have studied for a long time what makes people think something and what makes people change their mind. And in the face of uncertainty, what people do is they follow their role models or the people that seem like they're like them. Psychologists call this social proof. We just had, interestingly enough, the largest, I think, real-time experiment on this ever, which is vaccinations. There was a huge group of people who did not want to get vaccinated. Eventually they did. Why? Because at the beginning they thought people like them weren't getting vaccinated, and then they saw people like them get vaccinated. And so when we talk about anti-Semitism, we have to be honest that it is a very scary problem. But we also need to remind ourselves and others that it's small and fringe. Because if we start saying it's mainstream, it can become mainstream. That's what social science tells us. And the good news for us is it is not. It is not. A lot of the anti-Semitism we see is real, and that's the very far right, the very far left. We need to stomp that out. But a lot of it is not understood, and we can do that education and keep people with us. And most people are with us. Most people are not anti-Semitic. I was in Israel filming Screams Before Silence, and I asked my friend Adi, who lives there, how are you? How are you? And she said, I'm Israeli. We are more broken than a people can be, and we are stronger than a people can be. I really understand that. I sit here today, honored to be on this stage, honored to sit next to my friend Julie, feeling more vulnerable and more scared than I've felt in my life, but also stronger. More connected to this community, more connected to the resilience that we have. And the thing about us is we know how to do the work. We do. Okay, this is really cheesy. I used to do this when I taught aerobics. Bear with me. Is that all right? Everyone, raise your hand as high as you can. As high as you can. As high as you can. Now an inch higher. Look at that. When we think we've done all we can do more. And we do, and we have. Barry has said so beautifully that our identity as Jews needs to be more rooted in Sinai than Auschwitz, and that is true. Because being Jewish is a wonderful thing. It is a tradition of charity, of caring about other people, of knowledge, of study, of family, of community. Last January, my daughter, I asked her what she wanted for her birthday. She wasn't particularly affiliated. She said she wanted a Jewish star. She's worn it every day since, and so have I, and so have my two other daughters. My middle daughter is president of the Jewish Affinity Club at her school. She wasn't a member a year and a half ago. I am born again, and that has had some beautiful moments. I am part of this community in a different way. Thank you, Julie, for leading me here. And I am truly honored, as Sheila taught me to say, to stand in community with this incredible room of Jewish leaders. To all of you, kol hakavod.
Love you. You are already thanking Sheryl, as I would ask you to do. Stay standing. I want to first express my gratitude to each and every one of you for being here. I thank you for what you have done and what we will all do together. And now please join us as we conclude the GA with the singing of Hatikva.